Hey guys, Dina here. Today I'm going to create a card with a background inspired by Lisa Hetrick. It's going to be a resist background. I'm going to use 3 different types of paper and we'll test all of them. This first one is going to be the Artist's Choice by Gina K Designs. It's 110 pounds and it's nice sturdy cardstock. The second piece of paper is a layering weight by Gina K Designs. It's much thinner, but we're going to try it anyway. And the third piece is a piece of Strathmore Ready Cut Watercolor 140-pound paper made for this particular technique. But instead of watercolors, today I'm going to be using inks to achieve my resist. And for the design, I'm going to be using Blossoms in Bloom. This is a design by Gina at Gina K Designs. I'm going to use my Misty. Now Gina has a new grip mat. It's really cool because it has a dual purpose. And I'm able to put my paper right on this grip mat without any tape. And because it's a grip mat, I won't need magnets. The dual purpose is that she adds a design to the opposite side of the grip mat. So you can also use it as a stamp. But today, for the purpose of this video, we're just going to use it as a grip mat. So I'm going to put my design on top of the paper, and we are going to, it's brand new, so I'm going to just kind of pat it down with my hand and rub off that residue from the manufacturer. It'll hold the ink much better. So I'm going to line this. It's a 6x6 design, so I'm going to line it on my paper. And I have to use the Misty for this because I'm going to have to stamp it a couple of times. I'm going to be stamping with some watermark embossing ink. This is Gina K's embossing and watermark ink. It's going to be hard to see at first, so I'm going to stamp up the design, and I will stamp each piece of paper with this embossing ink. I have to do it a few times. I have to press a little bit harder. I probably should re-ink my pad, but I was just afraid to get too much ink. So I did that for all 3 papers, and now I'm going to add some embossing powder. This is Fine Detail White by Gina K Designs. It's a really great embossing powder because you don't get a lot of thickness because it's fine detail. So it holds the design really well. And once I get the powder off of here, you'll be able to see the design better. Right now it just looks like I'm putting it over blank paper. And there's the design. Oh, it's so pretty. So my finger touched a little bit, a few spots. So I'm just going to add a little bit more powder. And I'm going to set that aside because I'm going to be heat embossing it off camera. So I'm going to work on the little birds today. These are love birds that I illustrated for Gina K Designs. And again, I'm going to use my grip mat. For the love birds, I'm going to be using marker paper. The reason I want to use marker paper is because I'm going to be coloring them up with Copic markers. So to ink them in, I'm going to use the Premium Dye Ink by Gina K Designs. This is a great ink if you're going to be using alcohol markers because your image won't bleed. Unless, of course, you add too much ink. You want to be careful not to oversaturate your paper. But I'll stamp this a couple of times just to get a good crisp image. And I'm only going to use the 2 little birds for this card and a sentiment, which I'll show you later. You don't want to press too hard because, as you can see, the lines are not very thick, and if you press too hard, you'll smudge the the birds. So I'm going to stamp it twice. And there it is. Looks good. Okay, so I'm going to cut them out first because I have the grip mat. I prefer to cut them out first. I've had trouble sometimes of coloring images and then going to cut them out, and I might miss slightly and the cut's not as perfect as I would want it to be. So a lot of times I'll cut my images out first before I color them. And if you have the grip mat or any grip mat, this makes it a lot easier to color and not have to hold little tiny images. So I'm using the little mini Intracut. This little machine is so cute and it's so valuable because I move around from desk to desk, so it's so easy to carry it with me. And I find it's a little bit larger than some of the other mini die cutting machines out there. I have another one that is not nearly as spacious as this one is. So I really like this one. Besides, I like the color and I like everything to match. But of course you don't have to do that. Anyone will do. Whatever works for you. You don't have to worry about that. It cuts really well too. You'll see these images just pop right out. So it's a great little machine. If you don't have one, if you want to have a little one, I would definitely think about doing that. And I will put the links below. Okay, so on to the coloring. If you're new to Copics, there's a few little things you might want to keep in mind. First of all, to get a good blend, you want to make sure your markers have enough ink in them. You don't want to over ink them because you don't want them to drip on your paper. But a marker pen that has enough ink will help you saturate the paper enough to get a beautiful blend. So here I'm just laying in my base. I always do that. It's kind of a starting place for me. Not everyone does it, but I prefer to do it. It also wets my paper with the ink, so it kind of primes it for me. And I'm just going to color the entire bird itself, not their little clothes, but the entire bird with this very light, I think it's pearl white, that I'm using as a base for this, to begin my color. Now the best way to get a good blend is to have good paper. I mean, you can color on other papers, but your final piece is not going to be as pretty as it might be if you used paper designed for alcohol markers. And the reason being is that the paper has a smooth finish to it, which allows the ink to sit on top of the paper. So you have the ability to blend your colors before they dry too much. So I'm coming in with the next color. This is going to be my main color for my birds. I was a little hesitant to color them dark because of the streaking. Dark pens sometimes will give you too much streaking if you don't color with them properly. One of the things you should keep in mind is to color by following the lines of the image. So instead of scribbling across the image, you want to just follow the contours of the lines with your pen. The other thing with dark markers is if you blend them well, you won't see the streaking. Now, I'd like to do some little short flicks. I flick a lot away from my lines, and that helps to create a better blend as well, less streaking. And of course, if you do see streaking, which I do too, you can go back and you can add some more ink if necessary. But just keep in mind not to add too much ink because, like I said before, it will make your lines bleed a little bit if you have too much ink. Besides the fact, you don't want to waste your ink unnecessarily. So try to get your strokes in the first time, and then you can go back and build on that. So, and basically that's what I'm doing here. I'm just laying down color, trying to keep from streaking too much, and then I'm going to build up from there. So I left some little space around their cheeks and their mouth because I have to put in my big pink cheeks that I always do. It's kind of my signature thing. I think it helps to make them look happier too. So now I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to the bow and her dress and their beaks. I'm going to repeat this color because I want to have everything look cohesive. And because my background is going to be bright and busy, I don't want my images to be busy. So I'm going to just repeat these colors and everything will look like it goes together. And as much as they're going to add to the card, they will not take away from the background that we're going to create. Another thing to keep in mind when you're blending with your Copics is that the more moisture you have on your paper, the easier the blend. When I say more moisture, I don't mean to oversaturate your paper. I just mean that you need a good juicy marker. So I think with this one, I had to go add some ink just to get it to work a little bit better. When your inks are too dry, you won't get a good blend and you'll get a lot of streaking, and then you'll get frustrated and you just won't want to color anymore. So make sure your markers have enough ink, make sure you have enough time, and just enjoy the process. It's very relaxing if you like to color, it's very relaxing to sit and color. If you don't like to color, you don't have to add as much ink or as much color to your images. You can decide your color palette ahead of time and choose things that aren't going to require much coloring. I have a few cards that I created with these little birds that I made them mostly white, and so it was very little coloring of the bird. But for this card, I wanted to try a darker bird. And I really like how they came out. Now, another thing that helps with your blend is your brush nib. There's a lot of alcohol markers out there. I've tried a few others, but I always come back to the Copic markers because I use the Copic sketch marker because the nib on that is like a brush. And when I started my art career, I started using a brush. I painted with oil paints and I painted with acrylics, and then I discovered markers. I like them. I didn't use them much at first. I used pencils more than markers because it was easy to control. But when Copics came out and they came out with a brush nib, it was a game changer for me because the brush nib is very close to a paintbrush. It's soft, but it's not too soft. It allows for a lot of control. So it was like a happy medium for me. And I've just stuck with it ever since. Some of the other nibs are harder. I feel it's much more difficult, for me anyway, to get a good blend. But the Copic sketch markers they're perfect for blending. And you don't need to scrub it to get a blend. Keep in mind too that when you lay some color down and you're trying to make a blend, it takes a few seconds for it to kind of blend into each other. So you don't need to scrub your colors to get them to blend well. Just give them a few seconds. If they need to be blended again, you can come back with some more color and try to make that happen. But definitely don't scrub your paper, and you'll wind up messing your paper up for one thing, but you're also cause some other issues, some spotting and some blotchy mess that you don't want. So now I'm coming in with a little bit brighter orange yellow. I want to make his little belly kind of like a little robin. And I'm adding pink to her yellow dress and her bow, because when it just added more life to their dress. I could have used some browns, I could have used some darker yellows, but the pinks, because the pink is in the cheeks, I felt like that was just going to bring her little clothes to life. The little hearts and everything just kind of matches well. So now I'm coming in with a very dark shadow color, and I'm using it very sparingly. And actually, I'm only using it on areas that are overlapping each other. So I wouldn't put that too far into his head or her head. I just want to kind of outline the overlap. And then I'm going to blend that out again. And it still keeps the bird a nice brown color without getting too dark. So I'm coming back with my initial darker color, not the base color, but the next color, my number 2 color. And I'm blending everything again. Just trying to move those streaks around if there is any, and just getting a softer blend and pulling those shadows out. And they're starting to take shape. As you add darker colors in your shadows and your lights, you start to give your image some dimension. It won't look as flat if you're able to do that, and it takes practice. You're not expected to be able to do this immediately, but practice. If it's a look you want, just practice. You can do it. It's just steps you need to take, not necessarily scary, just methodical. And you can definitely achieve the results you want. So enjoy it, practice, experiment with colors, and have fun with it. These images are great to color too because they're not too tiny. It's really hard to color tiny images. If you like to color, it's much more fun to color something that's a little bigger. And there's a lot of companies out there that have little tiny images, and they are fantastic, but they don't need much coloring. So if that's your thing, great. If not, have fun with these little guys because they're just so happy, and they can be used all year round. They don't have to be used. Yes, there's hearts on them. I almost always incorporate hearts in something I draw, but it's not specific to any particular holiday or occasion. So I always finish off my images by adding some highlights with a gel pen. I like how it just makes things pop out, and it looks finished to me when I do that. So I really only do that, well, on the cheeks I give them little freckles, but I really only do that on their clothing. I won't do it on their fur because it's fur, but I did do it on his belly, but I was doing it as little hairs. Okay, so now back to the paper. So this is the Artist Choice paper, and I did 3 different things. 1, I used a brush. 2, I did a dip in the ink. And 3, I did a wet on wet. So you can see with the Artist Choice paper, the dip in the brush was great. The wet on wet, I couldn't get the color to move as well. And so here is the layering weight, and it's very similar. The results are similar, only the paper's thinner. I couldn't get my ink to move around as much as I probably would have liked to. But here's the watercolor paper, and I feel like the watercolor paper has really accepted the ink as well as it does with watercolors. So the first one is the wet on wet, and this one is I did with the brush. The wet on wet has a little bit lighter, and then the third one is where I dipped the paper into the ink. And it gave a nice blend too. It worked out well. So we're going to try this on all three papers because I heat embossed the design on all three papers. And the first one we're going to try is the Artist's Choice. It's 110 pound. It's a good sturdy card stock. And this one is the layering weight. We'll try that one too. You have to. I'll try each technique on each different paper. So this one is the Artist's Choice. Okay. So I think on that one I'm going to do a dip. This is the watercolor paper, and I really like how that accepted the ink, so we're going to definitely try one of the techniques from the sample sheets. Okay, so we're going to start off with the Artist's Choice paper, and I'm going to get my inks. I'm going to put them on. This is a glass palette that I have. I'm going to use Tangerine Twist by Gina K Design, and I'm using the medium orchid. Such pretty colors. I love how pink and orange look together. It's just so vibrant. So I'm watering down the inks, and I'm just gonna, this is a really simple technique if you're not into brushing, and it's quick, and all you have to do is dip your paper into your wet ink and just decide where you want to put which color and just press it in. And you're going to have to add more water from time to time, but it gives such a nice result, and you don't even have to use a paintbrush to do it. So this one's really fun. It's an easy technique to do, and you can see how the design is just popping out. The colors are just so beautiful and vibrant, and they just look so beautiful together. I'm just trying to fill up all the little spots without having to add more ink, which you really don't, because it's really nice to have a variation of intensity on your paper too. So there it is. That is so pretty. I just love that. And that's on the Artist's Choice 110 pound cardstock. Okay, I'm going to clean off my palette, and we're going to start again. This time we're going to use the layering weight, which is thinner paper. So I'm going to do a wet on dry technique, where I'm going to wet my inks down and my brush, but my paper is going to be dry. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to lay color in here and there, and as I'm doing it, you're going to see the design just pop out. It's such a super fun technique. And if you don't have watercolors, Gina K inks are perfect for this, as you can see. This works too. You just have to decide where you want to put your colors when you're doing it. And just make sure your inks and your brush are wet enough to be able to blend into each other. I'm just kind of randomly putting color around. And you'll see that even though the paper is different, each paper is different, the technique allows them to look so similar. So really you can't make a bad choice here. And it's fun to do. So pretty. And it's quick. Doesn't take long to do any of it. A little messy sometimes. But that's the fun of creating, right? Get messy. Okay, so there's the two lighter papers. Now I'm going to try the watercolor paper. So I've cleared off my palette. I'm starting all over again. And this time I'm going to do a wet on wet technique where I'm going to wet my paper and wet my inks and then come in with the brush. Now I'm doing it this way on this paper because this paper is made for this type of technique. It's made for it holds the water really well, and it also lets the ink just bleed into each other, which creates those beautiful hues, those beautiful colors. And this also can be very quick too, because the paper, with the paper being wet, it's doing most of the work for you, but you probably can't do this on the layering weight paper. It would just kind of buckle up your paper. So if you want to try a wet on wet technique, I definitely suggest that you use watercolor paper. This is a hot press, and it's 140 pounds, so it's nice and thick. It's going to allow you to use plenty of water without buckling. And you can dry this in between and come back and do it again and again on watercolor paper. But for the purpose of this video, I just kept laying color on it, and I still think it came out really pretty. So you want to just dabble your paintbrush here and there. You don't want to be scrubbing your paintbrush into each other, because then you'll just come up with one color or a muddy color. And this way, like I said before, the paper is really doing the work for you. I'm just adding the ink, and the paper is taking it and it's moving it around for me. And I love it. Look at that. It's so pretty. All right, I'm going to let those dry, and I'm going to work on the sentiment. I'm also going to use the medium orchid for this. I didn't have any black in my card design other than the lines of the birds, so I wanted to try this and actually liked it. So I'm inking it twice. I'm using Gina K Designs medium orchid, just like the one I used on our background paper. And I put it on the Misty and the grip mat. Holds it perfectly in place. And now I'm going to die cut it out. This is also Gina's guillotine cutter. I like this cutter. This one has a lock on it, which is perfect for me because anybody that knows me knows that I am so dangerous with sharp objects. I cut myself all the time. So having that little lock is perfect. So I'm going to run it through the mini intricate, and it pops out. Look at how cute that is. Oh, I love that color. Okay, so now I'm going to use Master Layouts 10. I'm going to use a couple of elements from there. And I discovered Gina K's Plum Punch cardstock. I'm crazy about that color. That is just so beautiful. And it's going to work so perfectly with my design. So I'm cutting out the elements, one of the elements, the matte element out of this. And I'm also going to make the Plum Punch my card base. And then the other one I'm cutting out with white cardstock. The color is just stunning. Okay, and here's my 3 papers. So now I have to decide, which one am I going to use? I like them all, but I'm going to use the watercolor paper. And I'm going to cut that out with Master Layouts 2 I'm going to use the larger rectangle just so I can get more of the design in there. I'm just centering it over the areas that I want to cut out. So pretty. Okay, and now I'm going to just put my card together. What I always do is I always do a layout first. Make sure I like the way things look, or if I have to add or take away, because sometimes I have too many things sitting on my desk that I want to use, and I'm like, nope, doesn't need all that. So I lay it out, and I make sure everything's going to work the way I have it in my head. And in this case, it does. So that's happy. Okay. So I'm going to use the double-sided adhesive to put my background down. I'm using Gina K's double-sided adhesive because if I can't place it perfectly the first time, it gives you some grace. You can pick it up and start it and do it again. So it's one of my favorite adhesives for that reason. Or sometimes I just change my mind, so I have to pull it off. But in this case, I already like the way it's going to come out, so I'm not going to change my mind. I just have to make sure I get the mats perfectly measured. I don't measure things. I just eyeball everything, so being able to lift something back up and fix it is great for me. Okay, so now for the center elements, I'm going to pop this up. I just feel like it would kind of accentuate the background a little bit if I didn't paste it on top of it. So I'm going to use some double-sided adhesive for this, foam adhesive. And I'm going to lay some glue on there just in case I don't get it right the first time. I'll have a little bit of wiggle room for it. And I'm going to pop up the sentiment as well. I just feel like when I pop things up, it just adds extra interest. Besides, it puts that little natural shadow behind it. And again, I'm just using some glue just to make sure I get my sentiment straight when I put it on. And I'm going to pop up the birds too, but I'm only going to put the adhesive on one side of the bird because I want it to sit on the center element, which is already popped up. So if I pop up the whole thing, it's going to be lopsided. So I'll pop up one side and I'll glue the other side. Just going to add a little bit of glue there. And add him to one corner. So cute. And I'm going to do the same thing for her. Just put a little adhesive on one side and add some glue. I have to do the layout first. I have to make sure that everything is going to fit the way I want it to. So that is cute. So now I'm going to add a little bit of color behind the sentiment. I just feel like I do this all the time. I just like to, I feel like it pops it out just a little bit. I have to be really careful because you can sometimes put too much color. The good thing about watering down your inks is that you can move them around and they lighten as they dry anyway. So now I'm using Gina K's pearl mix. This is the mini pearl mix she has now. I always have to add some bling, and I love this pearl mix because you can use it for so many different projects. So that was a silver. Not crazy about the silver. I'm going to go with the gold. I really like the gold. It just coordinates very well with the colors on the page. And I'm going to put just 3 of them. I'm doing the rule of 3s because it just brings your eye right into the design. glued down those little pearl mixes. I like the little ones. The little ones are great because they don't take away from your design. You know, sometimes your design does call for a bigger element or embellishment, I should say. And a lot of times I'll mix my sizes, but there it is, and the little ones worked perfectly. And the colors, I love these colors. How about you guys? Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the process, and I hope that you'll try something new. And if you like this video, or if I've helped you at all, please consider giving me a like and hit the bell if you want to know when I do another video. And thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.